Hey everybody, Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today I want to talk about scales, your approach to scales, and I want to do it in kind of a big picture way, such that whether you're a pretty new player just getting started out, maybe learning your first scale, or if you're a more advanced player and you're starting to explore things like modes and that kind of thing, I think this will really be useful for you to kind of put everything in its proper place, in its proper order. And part of the reason I think this is an important conversation is because we get hit with so much information. There's so much out there, social media and so forth, and maybe you've seen YouTube videos or you're part of online discussion groups and people are talking about all these crazy scales, you know, modes. They're talking about all these so-called altered scales like half-whole diminished and that kind of thing, Lydian dominant and all that kind of thing. And you might be a little overwhelmed. And maybe you've read an analysis of a certain piece of music or a certain solo, whatever, and you see, oh, the guitar player is going from harmonic minor to this to that. There's so many, it can be a little overwhelming. And you might even find yourself just saying, you know, is there something wrong with my playing? Should I be learning more scales? And I want to help you kind of sort through that. And in order to do that, I want you to consider this. What I'm going to suggest to you is that there is a proportional relationship between the simplicity of a scale and its usefulness. Okay, so to put that another way, the simpler a scale is, the more musical situations in which you can use it, okay? So that being the case, I'm going to ask you to think about your scales in roughly 4 categories, okay? 4 categories, okay? And we're going to order them from simplest to most complex, okay? So starting out, you can probably imagine what is very likely the most simplest scale that you're going to run into, and that's your basic pentatonic scale. You know, minor or major, it doesn't really matter. Your basic pentatonic scale is very likely the simplest scale you're going to use, okay? It's very easy to learn. You know, this particular position, I'm going to demonstrate A minor at the 5th fret of my guitar, and it's 2 notes per string. It's super easy. Okay, really easy scale to learn, really easy scale to play, and you can use it in so many situations, so many situations. It is far and away the most useful scale that you're ever going to learn, okay? Now, I want to share with you a little bit. My perspective is that of a guitar player who plays popular music. And when I say popular music, I don't mean whoever's at the top of the charts today, but what I mean is I play hard rock, I play country, I play blues, I do play jazz, I play classic rock. I think those forms of music count as popular music. You know, if we're playing really deep, more esoteric stuff, or if we're playing classical or symphonic music, or really in-depth jazz, bebop and hard bop, things of that nature, then maybe this analysis doesn't apply quite as much. But for most of what we play, I promise you, your pentatonic scale, major and minor, is the most useful scale you will ever learn. Okay, I'm coming up on 40 years of playing. I have a university degree in music, released a lot of music over the years. I've performed a lot of music over the years. I use the pentatonic scale every day in my own playing, not just in my teaching, but actually in my own soloing, my own improvisation, okay? It never stops being useful, and it's a springboard to many other concepts. You know, the idea if you know a minor scale, you also know a major scale, and music theory concepts of that nature, okay? So definitely prioritize your pentatonic scales, okay? What's the second category? The second category is what I like to call the diatonic scales, okay? Now, the word diatonic has a few different definitions. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. Basically, you think of your diatonic scale as all the notes that are found within a given key. Okay, there's going to be 7 of them. If we're in the key of C major, it's going to be C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's 7 different notes. Notice the pentatonic scale has only 5 notes. So the diatonic scale, you might say, is a little bit more involved. Little bit trickier fingering, not much trickier, but a little bit trickier fingerings, okay? You've heard the diatonic scale all the time. That's your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do that you might have done in elementary school or something, you know? Okay, that's your basic C major diatonic scale, okay? Your diatonic scales are very, very useful, and they add something that your pentatonics might not. This is my own opinion, and anytime you express an opinion about music, there's an element of subjectivity to it, but I think most of the time people would say, yeah, the diatonic scales are a little more flowing, they're a little bit more melodic, they're a little bit less angular than a pentatonic scale might be, okay? However, you can't use your diatonic scales. I shouldn't say can't. You can do anything you want. But I would recommend you not use your diatonic scales in as many different musical situations as your pentatonic scales, okay? Really easy example is your basic gritty kind of blues, you know, a 12-bar blues or something. Your pentatonic scales work great for that. And there's tons of creative stuff you can do. Your diatonic scales aren't going to work as well in that 12-bar blues, okay? Or another example, you know, you're jamming some classic rock songs or something and you run into a real simple chord sequence like E major to D major to A major that's been in a million rock songs, okay? E major, D major, A major. I promise you, your basic E major, or for that matter, E minor, diatonic scale is not going to work. Or it's not going to work very well. Your pentatonic scales are a much better choice, okay? So the first category for our scales are pentatonic scales. They're awesome, they're simple, and they never stop being useful. Diatonic scales can be used in a lot of musical situations, not as many as the pentatonic, but they're still great to know, and they add a certain flavor, a certain melodic sweetness, you might say, that the pentatonics might not offer you, okay? Third category are modes. Now, when I use the word mode, what I'm talking about are the traditionally recognized, sometimes called church modes, okay? There are 7 of those, okay? And that's what we call Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, okay? 7 modes. Modes are great, and they do have very, very interesting personalities. All of them do. But guitar players tend to think of, oh, I'm playing modally now, like it's the Holy Grail. And I'm going to tell you, it's not. And modes are kind of dependent on having a chord structure, a harmonic structure, if we want to put it a little fancy, that calls for the use of that mode. You can't just plant your feet in a rock song and the rock song's going A minor, F, C, G, or something like that. Very, very simple rock pattern that's been the foundation of just tons and tons and tons of rock songs. A minor, F, C, G, or maybe in another key, E minor, C, G, D, or something like that. You cannot plant your feet in that very simple rock song, A minor, F, C, G, something like that, and say, oh yeah, I'm totally going to play A Dorian because I'm just that cool. I'm playing modally now. Not going to work, okay? If you don't really have an eye and an ear and an awareness of the underlying chords and why your given choice of modes, whether it's Dorian or Lydian, whatever, is calling for that mode, it's really not going to work very well. It's not going to be the most appropriate choice, okay? So modes are kind of, you might say, situation specific. And as a result, they're useful in even fewer musical situations than are diatonic scales. So we can see the order emerging: pentatonic, diatonic, modes, and finally we arrive at the 4th category of scales, and these are what I call altered scales, okay? Altered scales. Altered scales are these weird creatures maybe you've heard about, half-whole diminished and Lydian dominant and things of that nature, where we're taking a given scale and we're changing certain notes. And the key distinction that I make between, let's say, modes and altered scales is that this is going kind of down the rabbit hole. If you don't follow this next 60 seconds or so of discussion, don't worry, just keep your eye on the big picture here. It's really not that important. The reason I draw the distinction between altered scales and modes is because those of you who play modes know probably that your basic modes overlay a given diatonic scale, okay? And again, if you don't really understand that concept, don't sweat it. It's not that important. But your basic modes overlay a given diatonic scale. Your altered scales do not, okay? If I suggest to you we play something like C Lydian dominant, okay? That's going to be C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B flat, and then the octave C. I promise you there's not a diatonic scale out there that has those very same notes, okay? So that's why I refer to them as altered scales. And guess what? Altered scales are not just situation specific, they're really chord specific. There are very, very specific circumstances where C Lydian dominant would be an appropriate choice. And as you're jamming, literally it might be appropriate only for like one measure where there's a certain chord that calls for that C Lydian dominant. You know, where that C7 chord is serving as a tritone substitution, for example. And again, not the purpose to get too far down the rabbit hole today. Again, big picture, okay? But as I said, they're situation specific and they're really even chord specific. You're jamming along in like a blues in, let's say, A minor or something. You see an E7 sharp 9. Yeah, that's a nice spot for that E half whole diminished scale. But you're going to use it only over that E7 sharp 9. You're not going to treat the whole progression with that. So very, very cool, very, very unique flavor, but very, very limited in how many different situations you can use them, okay? Those are altered scales, okay? So again, pentatonic, most useful and simplest. Diatonic, only a little bit more complex than pentatonic, not quite as many musical situations where they're going to be appropriate. Modes, awesome, very flavorful, but situation specific, as I said. Altered scales, even less commonly useful, or you might say even more situation specific, chord specific, but very unique flavor. You know, you think of it almost like if you were cooking, you know, salt and pepper you can use with almost anything, you know, but you get into some of the more exotic spices, they're appropriate in only certain dishes. It's a little bit like that, okay? So what do you do with this information if you're a guitarist? Prioritize your pentatonic scales. Get really good at them. If you're sitting there trying to use your pentatonic scales saying, oh, but I just feel like this is so basic, you know, maybe you could work more on your phrasing. Maybe you could work more on your rhythm, okay? Don't approach a given scale, whether it's a mode or an altered scale, whatever, and think that that's going to unlock your playing, okay? It'll give you a little bit of flavor, as I said, or even a lot of flavor, but there aren't as many situations where you can use it, okay? Learn and prioritize the scales in the order that I just gave them to you. Pentatonic, diatonic, modes, and then altered scales. And you'll have a much clearer focus moving forward, okay? All right, that's it for today. I hope you found this useful. Leave me a comment in the comment section, and of course, subscribe. Please subscribe to Guitar Journey. We're all on the journey together, and I'd love to have you along for my journey, and I'd love to be along for your journey, okay? Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.